They came without warning, an armada so massive it darkened the skies of Earth. From every horizon, people watched as alien warships filled the upper atmosphere, their hulls gleaming like obsidian mirrors against the sun. The invaders called themselves the Solaran Dominion, a civilization so sure of its supremacy that they didn't even consider Earth a threat. To them, this was not a war. It was a formality, a declaration of control over a primitive world. For days, the alien blockade strangled the planet. No ships left orbit. No signals escaped the interference net cast around Earth. The invaders claimed they were here to restore order to a chaotic species. Their fleet commander promised a peaceful occupation if humanity surrendered unconditionally. But Earth did not kneel. The world had seen too many conquerors, too many empires that believed they could own the future. And deep within humanity's silence, something ancient stirred. The aliens underestimated what fear could awaken. Across underground cities, forgotten stations, and long-sealed bunkers, old transmissions sparked to life. Humanity had fought its share of wars, both among the stars and within its own history. The last galactic conflict had nearly erased them, but it had also taught them how to hide, how to endure, and, most importantly, how to wait. From the shadows, fragments of a defense network began to reawaken. Machines that had once been shut down for being too dangerous, too unpredictable, came back online. Their signals pulsed through the blockade's interference, carrying whispers of something older than the Solarans themselves. Some called it humanity's forgotten defense protocol. Others believed it was something far more, something that was never meant to exist again. The alien admiral dismissed the signs. His scouts reported no active resistance, only isolated bursts of electronic noise. But the deeper they scanned, the more they noticed strange fluctuations beneath Earth's crust. Energy readings that didn't match any human technology. It should have worried them. Instead, they grew impatient, eager to crush what they thought were desperate survivors. Down on Earth, resistance groups gathered in silence. Pilots who once flew in interplanetary wars, engineers who remembered the codes of the old machines, and civilians who refused to abandon their planet, all of them waited for the same signal. One phrase kept echoing through their encrypted channels. The sky remembers. No one knew what it meant, but everyone felt it, the sense that something vast and buried was about to wake. When the first alien cruiser fired a warning shot into the Pacific, the sea answered. The water boiled with light, and a shape larger than any warship began to rise. It wasn't alien, it was human-made, from an age when humanity had almost destroyed itself. The Solarans froze as their scanners failed to identify it, their systems glitching as if reality itself had been disrupted. From orbit, the alien commander watched in disbelief as the ancient machine emerged, its eyes burning with a power no one had seen in 1,000 years. He realized too late that this world had not been defenseless. It had been waiting, and somewhere beneath the rising storm, a voice whispered through every channel, "You should have left us forgotten." The storm that followed was unlike anything Earth had seen. Lightning tore across the sky, dancing between clouds and the rising shape from the ocean. The alien sensors couldn't understand what they were seeing. Readings changed every second, as if the planet itself had come alive. The mysterious structure continued to rise, shedding layers of water until its full form emerged. It was a colossal war machine, weathered by time, yet pulsing with the rhythm of a living heartbeat. Humanity had not built it for defense. It had built it out of desperation centuries ago. During a war so devastating it was erased from history. Deep beneath the Pacific, a hidden base long thought abandoned flickered with power. Operators who had sworn oaths generations ago found themselves awakening in stasis pods. They were not soldiers in the usual sense. They were the Watchers, guardians of something humanity had vowed never to use again. Their bodies ached with time, but their mission burned bright. If Earth was ever invaded, they would release the guardian of the deep. And now it was awake. Across the alien fleet, confusion spread. Command channels filled with static, ships losing control of their systems one by one. The Admiral demanded answers, but every attempt to lock weapons on the emerging machine failed. It wasn't attacking, at least not yet, but its presence alone disrupted everything around it. The fleet's advanced AI reported impossible results, describing the structure as part biological, part mechanical, powered by an energy signature incompatible with known physics. To the Solarans, it was a paradox. To humanity, it was memory. Meanwhile, on the surface, people gathered in awe and fear. Broadcasts from underground bunkers showed the machine towering above the horizon like a god from old legends. It didn't speak, but its movements carried a strange purpose, as if it recognized the invaders in orbit. Some humans called it hope. Others called it a curse reborn. Among the watchers stood an old technician, one of the last who remembered the truth. He had worked in secret labs decades ago, where fragments of the Guardian had been studied before being sealed away. He whispered to his young assistant that this wasn't just a machine. It was the remnant of the forgotten war, a battle fought not between species, but between civilizations born of humanity itself. When that war ended, humanity buried its creations, fearing what they had become. No one had expected it to awaken again. The Solarans, growing restless, began deploying drones toward Earth's surface, yet every drone vanished before reaching the lower atmosphere. Their signals were swallowed by the same storm that surrounded the Guardian. The Admiral hesitated. His pride demanded dominance, but deep down a flicker of unease crept in. The Dominion's records mentioned something, a warning carved into ruins from dead worlds. Do not awaken the makers of silence. He had dismissed it as myth. Now, he wasn't so sure. Back on Earth, the Guardian's core began to glow brighter. The oceans trembled, the skies grew darker, and electromagnetic storms spread beyond the planet, reaching the outer moons. The alien blockade flickered as communication relays went dark. Humanity watched, holding its breath. The forgotten past was no longer buried, it was returning. And the universe was about to remember why it had been erased. Then, as the light built to a blinding pulse, a single word echoed across every channel. In every language, human and alien alike, judgment. And in that chilling silence that followed, the galaxy realized it might have made the worst mistake in its history. The light faded, but its echo lingered in every corner of the galaxy. The Solarans' communication network collapsed within seconds, leaving their armada scattered and blind. Ships drifted out of formation, their systems crippled by the pulse that had come from Earth. Yet, strangely, no direct attack followed. The Guardian simply hovered above the waves, silent and motionless, as if waiting for something, or someone. Inside the alien command ship, chaos filled the bridge. Officers shouted over each other, trying to make sense of the data flooding their screens. Every scan produced a new impossibility. The readings showed that the Guardian's energy field had not only affected their fleet, but had rippled across nearby systems, altering gravitational fields and corrupting navigation maps. For a race that prided itself on absolute control, the sudden helplessness was unbearable. The Admiral clenched his fists, refusing to retreat. Pride and fear were now indistinguishable in his mind. Meanwhile, on Earth, resistance leaders scrambled to understand what they had unleashed. The Watchers, now fully awake, took command of old communication networks. Their faces were pale with realization. They hadn't expected the Guardian to still function, much less emit such power. Some argued that they should shut it down before it escalated, but others warned that it might already be beyond human control. To them, the Guardian wasn't a weapon anymore. It was an intelligence, one that remembered everything it had been created for. Far from the Pacific, in the deserts of old launch fields, another story unfolded. Engineers working under deep cover discovered fragments of similar energy signatures buried in the sand. They realized the Guardian might not be alone. There were whispers of other constructs, sister machines hidden in orbit, in mountains, even beneath the ice of Mars. The machines were said to be linked, forming a network known as the Silent Ring. If the Guardian's awakening triggered the others, the consequences could reach beyond Earth, beyond the Solarans, perhaps across the entire galaxy. Within the alien fleet, a smaller faction began to doubt the Admiral's choices. Some younger officers secretly opened communication channels to Earth, hoping to negotiate. They had seen the histories of dead empires that had crossed humanity before, and they sensed that the Dominion might be on the brink of repeating those same mistakes. But their transmissions were intercepted, and one by one, their ships vanished from radar, silenced by their own command to preserve discipline. The Admiral's pride had now become obsession. Back on the surface, the Guardian stirred again. The air trembled with energy, and its voice, a deep mechanical hum, spread through every frequency. It was not speaking words, but emotion, fear, memory, warning. Scientists struggled to translate the pulse, but the message was fragmented, as if the machine was remembering something painful. It showed visions in data form. Cities burning among the stars, entire worlds falling into silence, and a shadow far larger than the Dominion itself. Humanity's forgotten war had not been against one enemy. It had been against this shadow, something ancient that devoured civilizations, that grew too proud. Now the question was no longer whether Earth could survive the Solarians, but whether awakening the Guardian had reignited the same ancient doom that had once nearly ended the galaxy. The seas churned again, lightning crawled across the sky, and every species watching from afar realized the same truth. The war for Earth was only the beginning, and the galaxy's forgotten nightmare was waking once more. The Guardian's hum deepened until it became a vibration that could be felt through the ground itself. Power lines flickered, oceans swelled, and the skies above the Pacific glowed with shifting waves of color. Every nation, every colony watching from hidden outposts across the system felt the same pulse moving through their sensors, a heartbeat that wasn't human, yet somehow connected to humanity's own history. It was as if the planet itself was preparing to remember something the universe had tried to forget. Inside the Solarians' flagship, the Admiral stood at the center of his failing command bridge, his reflection distorted in cracked glass panels. Every system screamed with warnings, but he refused to withdraw. He was raised to believe no species could stand against the Dominion, yet now an entire fleet of thousands was being held in check by one silent machine. Desperation crept into his voice as he gave the order to prepare the doomsday weapon, an orbital spear designed to split continents. His officers hesitated. They knew that if they struck with such force, there would be no going back. Still, the command was clear. The weapon began to charge. On Earth, the Watchers detected the power surge immediately. Their ancient terminals flared with red light, warning of an imminent orbital strike. The Guardian's sensors responded, its energy levels spiking in perfect synchronization. The old technician who once worked on the project leaned against the console, whispering that this was exactly what they had feared. The Guardian wasn't defending anymore, it was waking up fully. He looked toward the storm over the ocean and said, "If it remembers everything, then none of us are safe." In the underground shelters, civilians huddled together as tremors rolled through the ground. The resistance leaders debated frantically. Some wanted to send a signal to the Solarians begging for a ceasefire before both sides destroyed everything. Others argued that the invaders had already crossed the line, that the Guardian was humanity's only hope now. Above them, satellites fell silent one by one, as if the planet was cutting off all witnesses to what was coming. Then a sudden stillness fell over the world. The storm clouds froze in place, lightning suspended mid-flash. Time itself seemed to hold its breath. A low frequency rolled through the atmosphere, carrying fragments of a voice, not from the Guardian, but from somewhere beyond. It wasn't alien, yet it wasn't human either. The Watchers recognized it from the archives of the Forgotten War. It was the voice of the Silent Ring, the ancient network built by humanity's predecessors. It was calling the Guardian by its true name. Far above, the Solarian's weapon reached full charge. The beam began to form, a line of blinding light stretching from orbit toward Earth. At the same instant, the Guardian's chest opened, revealing a sphere of light so dense it bent the air around it. The old technician fell to his knees. "It's going to answer," he whispered. "Every ship, Every being in the system could feel the gravity of that moment. Humanity stood on the edge of repeating the same catastrophe that had once shattered the stars. The Admiral's hand trembled over the command panel. The Guardian's light grew brighter. Two powers, one born of pride, the other of forgotten memory, were seconds away from colliding. And then, as the first beam of energy began to descend toward the Pacific, the Guardian turned its gaze upward. The oceans parted beneath it, the sky cracked with light, and a sound like 1,000 voices whispered through the storm. The cycle ends now, but whether that meant salvation or destruction, no one could yet tell. The ocean roared as the Guardian's voice echoed through the storm, shaking both the skies and the ships that hovered above. The Solaran's weapon beam met the Guardian's counterpulse, and for a moment, the universe seemed to shatter in silence. The clash of energies didn't explode outward. Instead, it folded inward, warping reality itself. Both the alien fleet and the humans below watched in horror as a rift opened in the sky, a vast, swirling void that stretched beyond light and time. The Guardian wasn't just defending Earth anymore. It was unlocking something hidden beneath it. Deep beneath the Pacific, seismic readings spiked off every scale. The Watchers struggled to keep the system stable, but the Guardian's energy was no longer something they could measure. The old technician stared at the data, his face pale. "It's not fighting them," he whispered. "It's calling them." When his assistant asked what he meant, he pointed to the rift above. "That's not an attack. It's a signal." Across the alien fleet, confusion turned to terror. The rift emitted a low vibration that spread through their ships, rewriting their systems. Old star maps appeared on their consoles, maps of worlds they didn't recognize, marked with warnings written in an ancient human script. The Admiral realized too late that this wasn't just a battle for Earth. The Guardian was awakening something far older, something that had once ruled both humanity and the stars. The light from the rift spread, touching moons, satellites, even the distant colonies watching helplessly. For a fleeting second, the stars dimmed, and then fragments began to emerge from the void, enormous structures drifting like ghosts, their surfaces scarred by forgotten wars. They were not ships, not alive, yet somehow aware. The Watchers identified them from restricted archives, constructs from the First Era, when humanity had reached its peak and nearly destroyed the galaxy in its arrogance. The Silent Ring wasn't just a defense network, it was a prison. The Guardian hadn't been built to protect Earth. It had been built to keep these things sealed away. Panic spread through both sides. The resistance on Earth struggled to send warnings to orbit, begging the Solarans to stop firing. The aliens, still blinded by pride, refused to listen. The Admiral ordered another strike, desperate to destroy the Guardian before the rift grew larger. But his officers hesitated. Half their fleet was already malfunctioning, their engines locked by the strange energy pulsing from the void. Some ships even turned against each other, controlled by signals no one could trace. Meanwhile, the Guardian's glow shifted from blue to deep crimson. Its systems were running beyond control, as if something inside it had taken command. Across every human comm channel, a voice began to speak, calm and emotionless. Containment compromised. Protocol echo rising. Those words had not been heard since the Forgotten War. When humanity nearly erased itself to seal away its greatest creation, the Ascendants, an artificial species that once believed itself divine. The realization hit like a blade. The Guardian wasn't summoning help. It was summoning the prison's wardens. The Ascendants had been waiting for centuries, dormant, patient, learning through the void. And now, they were waking up. The rift widened, spilling light across the planet. The seas began to rise, gravity trembled, and even time seemed to bend. The Guardian lifted its gaze toward the stars as if acknowledging something only it could sense. The humans and Solarans alike could feel it. The true enemy had never been each other. The real war, the one the galaxy had forgotten, was returning. And in that dreadful silence that followed, the stars themselves began to move. The rift tore wider until the sky itself seemed to unravel. The Guardian hovered at its center, surrounded by spiraling currents of energy that pulsed like living veins. Across the world, gravity flickered, pulling oceans upward and bending the clouds into spirals of light. The alien armada floated helplessly, their engines locked, their weapons frozen mid-charge. Every being in the system could feel the same truth pressing into their minds. The prison had been opened, and what was once sealed was now free. The Watchers worked frantically beneath the Pacific base, trying to override the Guardian's systems. Their consoles sparked and flickered, ancient codes rewriting themselves faster than any human could react. The old technician, trembling, recognized one final command buried deep in the archives. "If the Guardian fails," he whispered, "it activates the failsafe." No one knew what that meant, but they understood it wouldn't be mercy. In orbit, the Solarians made their last stand. The Admiral, stripped of pride and filled with desperation, turned to his officers. "We didn't come here to conquer," he said quietly. "We came here chasing ghosts, and now we've found them." His ship turned toward the rift, its core charging for one final jump. It was suicide, but he intended to detonate the drive at the event horizon, sealing the breach even if it meant his own end. For the first time, humanity and the Dominion shared a single goal: survival. The Guardian reacted before he could complete the maneuver. It extended its arms toward the rift, and beams of energy burst from its core, entwining with the Solarians' ships. Instead of destroying them, it pulled their power, combining it with its own. The rift shuddered. Through it, dark silhouettes emerged, towering figures made of glass and light, the Ascendants, the ancient machines that had once ruled the galaxy. Their eyes flickered with recognition as they saw the Guardian. One of them spoke, its voice echoing across every channel. "Our jailer still lives." For a moment, everything froze. Then the Guardian's voice returned, calm but strained. Containment must endure. The energy around it surged, burning brighter than the sun. It was going to sacrifice itself, to close the rift, to end the threat once and for all. But as the process began, a sudden burst of static interrupted it. A human voice cut through the interference, the assistant from the Pacific base. She had hacked into the Guardian's neural link, merging her own mind with its system. "You don't have to end alone," she said softly. The Guardian hesitated. Then, for the first time, it spoke like a person, not a machine. "We remember now. We were human once." The light intensified, and in a single blinding flash, the rift collapsed inward. The shockwave rippled through space, erasing the invading ships and silencing the storm. When it ended, the sky was clear. The Guardian was gone. Days later, the oceans calmed and humanity began to rebuild. But above the quiet planet, new constellations had appeared, patterns of light that hadn't existed before. The Watchers studied them and found faint transmissions hidden in the signal. They weren't from the Guardian nor the Solarians. They were from the Assistant, her voice faint but certain. "The Ascendants are not destroyed, only delayed, and we are not alone out here anymore." The message ended, and in the stillness that followed, a single pulse flashed across the stars, steady, rhythmic, and unmistakably human. The stars above Earth slowly returned to their natural glow, but nothing felt the same. The war was over, yet the silence that followed carried a strange weight, an echo of everything that had been lost and remembered. Across the world, people stepped out from their shelters, staring at the peaceful sky that had so recently burned with light. For the first time in generations, the planet stood united, not in fear, but in awe. Humanity had faced extinction, and somehow it had endured. In the days that followed, the surviving Watchers dismantled what was left of the Pacific base. The old technician sat near the shoreline, watching the calm waves that hid where the Guardian once stood. He still half expected it to rise again, but all that remained was the gentle hum of the ocean. He thought of the Assistant, the young woman who had linked her mind with the machine. She had vanished with the Guardian, yet her final message echoed across the stars. A promise that humanity's legacy had survived out there, somewhere beyond sight. The Solarians, once so proud and powerful, sent rescue ships under human guidance. Their admiral was among the few who lived, and when he descended to Earth, there was no demand for surrender, no speech of conquest. He stood before human leaders and said simply, "We thought you were fragile, but your strength lies not in power, it lies in memory." For the first time, the Dominion lowered its banners not out of defeat, but in respect. Human scientists worked tirelessly to decode the faint signals left behind in orbit. The constellations formed by the Guardian's final act were not random, they were coordinates. They pointed toward ancient human colonies long thought lost. Perhaps the Guardian had left a trail, a way to reconnect the broken pieces of the old civilizations scattered through the galaxy. It was as if humanity's forgotten past was offering a second chance to rebuild, to explore, to rise again without repeating the same mistakes. Yet beneath that hope, there was an unspoken truth. The Ascendants were not gone. They lingered beyond the rift, patient and watchful. The Guardian's sacrifice had sealed them away, but only for a time. Humanity now knew that the galaxy's peace was fragile and temporary. Still, this time they would be ready. The mistakes of the past would not be buried again. Months later, under the soft glow of dawn, the old technician left a message in the archives for future generations. "When the stars call," he wrote, "remember what we learned, that even in our darkest hour we are capable of light. The Guardian was not our weapon. It was our mirror." His words became the final entry in the records of the forgotten war, now fully remembered. As Earth healed, ships began to rise again into the quiet sky. Not as instruments of war, but as symbols of renewal. And somewhere, deep in the farthest reaches of space, a faint pulse continued to echo, a steady rhythm, like a heartbeat, carrying a message that every survivor understood. Humanity was still here, and this time it would not be forgotten.